Okay, well, it's about 9:04, 9:05. So why don't we start? We'll let Nancy Fitzpatrick in. The first, the sign in the back reminds everybody that you're being recorded, and from this point on, we'll post it up to YouTube so people who aren't here can benefit from the discussion. You have the ability to shut off your video, to mute yourselves, to be as anonymous as you would like. And we don't hold that against you. You should also know that even though you're seeing names and possibly telephone numbers as people come in, what gets put up on the YouTube channel is anonymous. They don't put the names up. When it converts the video, it doesn't put up that identifying information. So with that, we'll start in. I hope you had a good July 4th weekend. It was nice taking the Thursday off from this, have a little extra time. And the big news for us in the past week has been the executive orders that came out last week, and the kind of continuing movement to going back to work and returning to normal, or closer to normal than we are now. So I did want to take some time today and kind of go over those. We've gotten a bunch of questions, so it's probably worth kind of describing it, having, getting your questions and your input into this, and having it up on the web so that other people that have similar questions can take a look. I'm going to try sharing my screen a bit. Where am I going with this? So you've probably seen the executive orders. There are two of them. The first one we want to talk about is number 41, which is the one that deals with professional licensure. So you should be seeing the professional licensure thing, and I want to pull up my notes for these as well, because that way I make sure I cover all of this. So first thing I wanted to point out and kind of make clear is that the licensing of the Lsps is done by the Board of Registration of Hazardous Waste Site Cleanup Professionals, or colloquially the LSP board, and not by the Waste Site Cleanup Program, and not by DEP. The board is an arm of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. There's the one member is appointed by the Commissioner of MassDEP, and that board member, the chair of the board, is Millie Garcia Serrano, our regional director in the Southeast region, and everybody else is appointed by the governor. And I say that up front because everything else that I'm going to say is my kind of speculation and interpretation, but for the definitive statement and interpretation of any of this as it applies to LSPs, you really should talk to the board, and particularly Beverly Roby, who's the executive director of the board. And I would also take a moment to point out that I believe that there is an upcoming board meeting on July 22nd, and that their agenda will very likely focus on the executive orders and how all of this will work for licensing. So with that said, and all of those caveats, the interesting thing with this executive order is that you would have no way of knowing that it deals with licensure, because the title talks about child care programs. But as we scroll down through the whereases and child care, the additional rescission of orders. So this part basically rescinds, takes away, eliminates, negates, whatever word you want to use. They use rescind, so we'll use rescind, the previous executive orders that extended the licensure. And I think one of the key points of this, and part of the questions that we've received, is people pointing out that, but the previous executive order said that it's going to be extended till sometime after the end of the state of emergency. So isn't this kind of reneging on that, or isn't the second executive order, the most recent one, kind of in conflict with the first one? And B, does this mean that the state of emergency is over? And for the kind of the answer to the second question is no, the state of emergency is not over. What the governor is doing is recognizing, and we've talked about this in the past, that as this goes on longer, our original impressions that it was going to be a short-term issue, and thus we keyed things off the state of emergency designation, that as it goes longer and longer, the state of emergency is going to kind of be in place for a long time, probably well beyond we start this increment. Well, we started the incremental return to normal. And so some adjustment of the language and how we deal with it, how we view the overall problem has to be made. It's not a black and white, there's a state of emergency, there isn't a state of emergency. And then the answer to the first question, isn't there a conflict between the two executive orders? By rescinding the first executive order, I would say there's no conflict because that one now doesn't exist. And what's important is now what the second executive order, the most recent one, is saying. And it seems to set up if first, kind of what's important, I think, is that if a license is expiring on or after July 10th, so tomorrow, then the normal process and timelines are going to apply. So if your license expires August 1st, July 23rd, then you should be preparing for that and doing the paperwork and filing the renewals or extensions or grace periods or whatever might apply for that license as you normally would. And the ones that expired between March 18th and July 9th, the executive order indicated that the boards should take action to extend those to at least October 1st so that they'll have some time to address, to get whatever the necessary credits are, et cetera, and file the paperwork and all. So that's simply what it says. It does rely upon, I believe, some action that the board would take on July 22nd. And I would expect that would be a major piece of the July 22nd meeting. So kind of related to that, one of the other questions that we have gotten is, how many credits are available? And I'm glad Wendy Rundle is on the call because we're very appreciative of all the work that the LSP Association is doing and kind of providing necessary credit, providing the mechanism for LSPs to get credits online while we're going through this COVID crisis. And particularly for DEP, the partnership that we have for them is probably really important during this time period because we don't have access to the same technology that they're able to access. And I hope you're seeing on the screen, I think this would work, the DEP regulatory credits. Can somebody shake their head if you're seeing those? Okay, thank you. Oh, there's Wendy. I'm only seeing like 5 people, so I'm glad you're at the top there. And these are so that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe approaching 10, and will be at some point over 10 online DEP regulatory credits that will be available. Some are available now, some will be available in the very near future, and then there are a couple that we're looking for the longer term. So I think we are building up a library of DEP regulatory credits that will be helpful for the LSPs, not only now during COVID, but going into the future for kind of making the necessary credits available to them in a timely manner. So Okay, that's what I wanted to say about the licensing. I'll stop and see if there are any questions or comments or suggestions about that before we move on to the second one.
I have this is Elliot. I've got a related question. The courses that were approved at the last LSP board meeting, one of them, the board still hasn't issued the certificate. From what I understand, emailing with Christy at the LSPA, they have to release it. Some of them will release. It's the 1,4-dioxane course, which was given on May 21. It was approved for one technical credit, which is all I need. But they still haven't issued the certificate to the LSPA yet.
Okay.
Anybody know anything about that?
Wendy knows. Wendy, you have to unmute. You're muted. There you go.
Yes. So yeah, I'll just say for the record and for anyone who might listen later, that the LSPA has written to the LSP board with a number of requests for them to take up at their July 22nd meeting. And the request to release that CU form is one of those items. So every other course that was approved through the LSPA, we have CU form for, but that one, there was a mistake. So whatever, there has been a delay. So if that is not sent before July 22nd, then we'll bring that up at the meeting, Elliot. And you and many others have requested that. So for now, you need to wait. And as soon as the LSPA gets it, obviously we'll send it out and let you know, but we don't have it at this point. And then the other thing I was going to say with regard to what Paul just summarized from the governor's order is that the LSPA has also asked the LSP board to clarify that order and articulate specific examples of how that order will be implemented by the board, just because again, we've gotten a number of questions about it, and there are questions about, you know, if you have a 90-day extension, when does that expire? Can you get a 90-day extension? Can you get that 90-day extension if you have an end of July renewal? If you don't have the correct number of credits that you need in order to get an extension, and there are various nuances. Whoever knew there were so many, but there are a lot of nuances with regard to renewals. So we've asked the LSP board to clarify that and made the suggestion that they write those guidelines out and send them to DP, post them on their website, the LSPA, any other way that they can get the word out to stakeholders. And then with regard to credits, I took a quick look at what you put up, Paul, with regard to DP credits, and that looked accurate. And there are a number of other technical credits that the LSPA is working on for live webinars. And also we've got quite a good number of on-demand online courses for technical credits that are really close to being done. Most of them are repeats of live webinars, but some of them are new. So we're trying to build that library for technical credits as well. So I would expect by the end of the summer, there'll be quite a number of opportunities to get technical credits on demand as well.
When do you follow up to that? So it sounds like it's uncertain whether the certificate for the 1,4-dioxane course would be issued before that next LSP board meeting.
Right, but the course was approved. So
was the mistake resolved, whatever that was? You said there was a mistake.
The mistake was on the CEU form that the LSPA received. So we had to send it back, and that mistake has to be corrected.
So the
we didn't want to send you an incorrect form.
The courses that were listed, like the managing hazardous waste course, are those CEUs issued right after you take the course, or is there also the ones that are already approved?
I'm not sure.
The list that Paul put up had a number of courses.
Oh.
One of them is managing hazardous waste. It's for 2 credits. So if you take that course, I haven't taken it yet.
Oh,
So if
that's
I
the
took-
construction course, I think.
Yes. So if
Managing
you
waste.
take that course, you get the CEU right
Oh yeah,
afterwards.
you get it immediately,
Okay.
as long as you pass.
So,
And
so
I'll have to study up on
you
it.
get it like within a few hours electronically.
Okay.
So Wendy, just to be clear, the error was kind of a typographical error in the form, not a question about whether the course in fact
Right.
was valid.
Right, not at all.
So
No.
it's just a paperwork issue.
Right. In fact, the course was offered as a live webinar and it was already approved. So it's just a paperwork issue. So for people who need to renew by the end of July and need to send something in, you should have a letter from the LSPA that notes your successful participation in a course, which is what we
Yes,
were
I
using
do.
as a placeholder until we got the CU form. So I would recommend that, and we've been doing this for others who have the same question, that you send that letter in with your renewal. That's the best we can recommend.
Or
And I
take
don't-
another course.
No, I mean, if you've taken the course, it's just a paperwork issue. And if any question comes back to the LSPA, then we can verify that you took that course. And the letter that we've been sending as placeholders to people when we don't have the CU form, even though that hasn't been approved by the licensing board and isn't endorsed or anything like that, it does say that the LSPA certifies, I guess, or agrees that you successfully completed the course. So that's what I would do. That's
Okay.
just my advice. That's not LSP board advice, and that's just what we're suggesting for people. So
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other kind of questions about training or the Executive Order 41 before we move on? And you can see from the Wendy's discussion about the complexities of this, you now understand why I'm trying to be very clear that that you really should talk to the board, that it's not DEP's role to kind of go into those complexities and make decisions on them. Okay, with that, let's move on to number 42, and I'll share the screen again. Okay, 42, this one deals with the state permits that were issued and the timelines for all of that. And the, if you think the complexities of licensing are large, then the complexities of, I'm trying to get my notes to, the complexities of permitting and the appeals that go along with them are also very large. Luckily, I would say that first point out that the Wayside Cleanup Program only has one permit, which is the special projects permit. So, technically, we are less affected by this. We weren't particularly affected when the first executive order went into effect. And now with this revision or superseding order, again, we're less affected. But we look at it a couple of ways. One, there are some things we want to clarify. And two, the direction for kind of reopening and reestablishing work norms that this represents as kind of a directive from the governor, who is our boss, kind of gives us direction for modifying kind of what we've been doing in the Wayside Cleanup Program to try to match and work parallel with this. So even though this does not necessarily specifically apply to a lot of what we've done in Wayside Cleanup to address COVID, it's certainly a good indication of the direction that we should be going in order to kind of be consistent with the governor's directive. So this goes into detail. It goes on, again, lots of whereases. Oops. And it deals with, specifically with issues on the constructive approvals and conducting hearings and timelines for the permit decisions. And there are a bunch of dates for appeals. Basically the dates to be concerned about are it's anything from March 10th to July 1st. So this is already into effect now. If you had a deadline to file an appeal that came in March 10th to July 1st, then the new deadline to file an appeal is now August 10th. And after July 1st, if the deadline to file an appeal is coming up, falls after July 1st, then the new deadline for that is either August 10th or the normal appeal deadline under DEP rules, whichever is later. So for appeals, August 10th is a date to be watchful for. For constructive approvals, which for most of the rest of the agency kind of went on hiatus during the COVID emergency. We'll talk about wayside cleanup in a second. The constructive approvals are back. If there was a constructive approval that fell between March 10th and July 1st, then the new deadline for MassDEP to either act or have it constructively approved would be August 17th. And if it's falling after July 1st, the deadline will be August 17th or whatever the normal deadline for DEP to act. And then for everything else that might be affected by the old executive order number 17, the hearing deadlines, permit decisions, et cetera. If it fell between March 10th and July 1st, the new deadline will be August 10th. And if it's after July 1st, it's August 10th or the normal deadline, according to DEP rules. So by mid-August, what I take from all of that and how it applies to wayside cleanup, by mid-August, the governor is envisioning that the whole permit and approval process should be back on track following normal timelines. So what does that mean for wayside cleanup? As I said, the original executive order number 17 had kind of tangential application to us. We put out specific guidance on this. I'm going to stop the share. We put out specific guidance on this in late March, and the guidance. Hold on, I lost my notes. I can't speak without my notes. The guidance is on the Wayside Cleanup COVID-19 guidance page. It's called Guidance on Continuity of MassDEP Wayside Cleanup Operations and MCP Compliance During COVID-19 State of Emergency. And in that guidance, just to review, one, we noted that emergency response staff would continue to respond to verbal notifications and that we would continue to issue oral approvals for IRAs. We noted that we would continue to review written IRA plans, and we specified that, you know, in this particular circumstance, if DEP elects not to issue a written approval or denial within 21 days, then the constructive approval would still go ahead, that the IRA plan would be approved. So we were maintaining the constructive approval, and particularly since IRA plans were to deal with emergency situations, time critical situations, it didn't make sense to hold off approval of these actions until some point into the future. So we wanted to confirm that those would still go ahead. We noted that EDP was available and remains available and has been incredibly helpful for us, for everybody making submittals, so that, if you could do it, if you could continue work, then the tools were available to make the submittals as you normally would. We did recognize that in that guidance that kind of routine submittals, not those time critical ones that we put the emphasis on, but the routine submittals for like phase 1 reports, phase 2, phase 3, some of that work could be affected by COVID-19, would be affected by COVID-19. And that was understandable, and that we pointed out that we had a mechanism for addressing that, which is the Oyster Cleanup 121 form, the notice of delay. And we pointed people in that direction so that if you were going to have a COVID-related delay, file the 121, put in there what the problem is, why it's going to be delayed, what deadlines will be missed, and we asked for some estimate of, once things return to normal, essentially, or once you were able to, kind of what would be an estimated deadline. And we didn't ask for specific dates. We pointed out that it would be sometime in the future, so that it would be perfectly fine to say that, once it returns to normal, we expect, 3 months after that or 4 months after that. And this is probably the key piece of all of this, was that we said that DEP intends to exercise enforcement discretion for failure to meet those deadlines for those routine submittals during the state of emergency. And we continue to stand by that. So while the executive order didn't specifically apply to us, I think the collection of those points and that guidance was consistent with that executive order. So the question that I would, before I get to the questions, just for kind of an FYI, and I'll maybe share this screen here because it's more fun. Okay, so the 121 submittals, we've received 40 of them between March 13th and yesterday. The bulk, of course, went to the Northeast region because they do have the bulk of the sites, but all the regions had them. And they were fairly evenly distributed for the phased reports, 7, 8, 9, for each of phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and 9 for the permanent or temporary solution statements that would be delayed. The biggest, however, were there were 21 submittals that weren't covered by the phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 checkoff boxes. So these are most likely, for the most part, noting the delay in doing phase 1 or tier classification. So that's the universe that we're talking about. It's not a huge amount, but those are ones that clearly were delayed due to COVID-19. And so as we move ahead, we want to kind of deal with a couple things. One, we want to revise our guidance to be consistent with that new executive order and be consistent with the direction that the governor is pointing us to, restoration of more normal activities. Not normal, but more normal. And so what we need to do there is think about and talk about how we kind of get back to the expectation of people meeting the deadlines for those routine submittals. And I, like that executive order did, I would imagine that it would kind of establish some date certain. The executive order had August 10th and August 17th for different things, where we would want to say that, by this time, everybody should be back on track for the most part, and how we do that. I would also point out that, there may be exceptional cases where, there are clearly some COVID-19 related issues that, could be addressed. I would expect, going into the future, if somebody was, working at a nursing home, or a site, heating oil release at a nursing home, might pose particular challenges given the very sensitive populations and the issues there. But barring those, truly outlier, unique cases, I think we would expect that work should return more to normal, and most sites would be able to meet the normal deadlines once we go through. We also would need some guidance on how these 40 sites that had notices of delay would kind of come back to a more routine schedule, and we expect to work that through. So all of this is not to say that we have guidance or direction at the moment, because we're going to work out those details, and I'm interested in hearing from you now, and either through email or discussion next week as well, once you had some time to think about it, what your thoughts are in this kind of return to closer to normal, and kind of your thoughts on what our guidance, how our guidance should approach that. So with that, I'll stop the share and move you guys back in my line of sight, and open it up for kind of your thoughts and comments about kind of returning to normal deadlines and expectations. None. It's a go. Okay, we'll just use August 10th and move ahead. Yes, Dorothy.
Sir, just a quick question. Can you send the link for emergency order number 42?
I will see if it's up on the web.
I
Yeah.
couldn't find it. I just looked.
Yeah. I obviously have a copy of it. I'm just cautious about, and I'll check with my lawyers about it. You know, this is a governor's thing. I know it's public. I've specifically asked that. It's in effect, but I just have this nagging thing in the back of my mind that it might not, some person at DEP posting the governor's executive order for the first time might not be the most appropriate way of going about it. So I will check and I will find it and make it available and post it and post a link to it.
That'd be great. Is it dated today or yesterday?
No, it was dated over a week ago. I think it was July 2nd.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So
if I could just jump in quickly here, Paul, if you don't mind. I mean,
thank you.
It is, my understanding is that it's effective, and I have a signed copy dated July 1st. And our job is to make sure that you guys have it. It's not good when the Commonwealth is not making these orders widely available. So we'll definitely do what we can to make sure that you guys all get a copy in whatever way as soon as possible, if you can't find it. I had a hard time finding it as well.
Okay, so that's my lawyer saying that it is perfectly appropriate for me to post it. So there we go. I have legal cover. Thank you, Luke.
Paul?
Yes.
It's Matt.
Oh, hey, Matt.
So two thoughts. One, you could share it with the LSPA and then absolve yourself as the secretary of all knowledge of the orders you've given to Mission Impossible there.
Yeah.
The second is that I understand the dates. Isn't this sort of analogous to like saying we're going to open school, except that there may be specific local issues and trying to follow guidelines and things? So, I mean, might it not be appropriate for the department to be thinking about saying, hey, we're getting back to normal, except that if everything changes tomorrow and you're doing work in Chelsea and it's terrible in Chelsea, or Chelsea's in a lockdown or something, then you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Should there be some accommodation or some thought that it may not be universal across the Commonwealth?
Okay, I have two thoughts, Matt, and I agree with you. First is I think we are in a good position in wayside cleanup because we're not relying on the executive order. We're relying primarily on enforcement discretion here. That we do have some flexibility so that if there are unique circumstances, we can take that into account. And I believe we intend to do so, speaking for myself.
So if your guidance or whatever you issue could, reflect that says, hey, we understand different communities might be in different stages of opening or whatever you want to call, whatever it's called, that might affect, the department would use its enforcement discretion, and, you might file a 121 form saying, hey, I can't do this in this community at this time because their local health officials have declared such and such.
Yep, I think we will always have the 121 form for people to use. the kind of what I will be struggling with, and will, you know, looking to all of you for kind of guidance on and help in framing the words, is how to strike that balance. On the one hand, setting the expectations consistent with the governor's executive orders that, you know, people should be meeting deadlines where they can, while at the same time saying, but we recognize there are unusual circumstances, so don't hesitate to contact DEP should one of those come up. So it's that, and maybe I'll just transcribe what I just said, but that's the message. What, you know, I'm going to play the cynical, you know, regulatory bureaucrat for a second, and say what I don't want to do is leave a large kind of door open for people to use COVID-19 as a reason not to meet deadlines. And to be clear, I think the number of 121s that have been filed is very small considering our universe of sites and the work that's being done. So I don't think that that's a big problem, but you know, there will always be a PRP that, you know, might look to that as a way to avoid a deadline. If somebody isn't, you know, doesn't want to do work, and there are some people out there who don't, then, you know, we want to make sure that the delays that come in are truly, in fact, justified and not just a reason not to meet their obligations under the MCP.
So to further that end, would it be useful to provide some examples, like say, you know, hey, we were going to excavate, you know, 120-day soil here over our seas or whatever, but, you know, the town has prohibited construction activities, and, you know, the excavation of the soil and loading would be a construction activity. So, you know, we are unable to do that and meet our, you know, deadline or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that we'll kick around to try to find kind of how to
or maybe look at
balance.
the ones that you've already gotten and agreed with and say, you know, for example, this.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Paul?
Yes.
I
Liz?
wanted to mention, I was able to find the order by searching on the title of the order. So it is publicly available. It was on National Law Review, so they must have linked to somewhere on our state website.
Yeah, I'll find it. I can go into the back end of the web and find it, but we'll also put it on as a link on the wayside cleanup pages.
Okay, if you search on the actual title of the order, you'll come up with it, or at least these words: order resuming state permitting.
Yeah, I was with the other one with Executive Order 41 about the licensing. I was having a hard time finding it online, and then I was uploading something else to the web, some other document, and was looking at kind of the documents, and somebody had just uploaded it, and I could tell from the back end, and which is why I provided a link to that one. But it was kind of hard to find if you were just searching it, but in the back end, it's easier to find. So I'll find it. There will be a link, and we'll put it on our pages. I'll put it on the Wayside Cleanup COVID-19 guidance page. Okay, well that was, you know, our big news for the week. Any comments? Anything you guys want to talk about? You know, I'm going to have to work on my radio and blogging skills so that in a situation like this, I push a button and the sound of crickets will start going.
Yeah. This is just getting very old, Paul. I mean, not listening to you, but this whole
yeah,
ensconcement.
Too many whereas clauses to comment on without reading it in detail.
Well, to be clear, we're not asking for comments on the governor's executive order. That's a done deal. And you know, the governor doesn't consult me when he's putting those out. But it is comments on how wayside cleanup should move ahead, considering these executive orders. And I think the overall message, and what I've heard from in the discussions in these calls before, that a lot of your work has been going on, and you've been able to get out and do the field work, particularly that would be necessary. So I find that encouraging. And my impression from that, plus the low number of 121s that were filed, is that the wayside cleanup work seems to be going through this at an appropriate level, and kind of stepping up and returning more to normal isn't that necessarily that big a deal. I think we're, you know, from the wayside cleanup staff point of view, it is weird doing all of this from home with minimal entry into the office, but we're getting ways around that. We have a question on the chat saying, any information on when in-person audit inspections might return? And
Definitely delayed.
And the answer, and the answer to that would be imminently. We have guidance and direction for kind of stepping up our kind of conditions under which we will feel comfortable going out and doing inspections, not just wayside cleanup, but inspection of other facilities regulated by DEP. So we've been working that out, kind of when, where, how, kind of what PPE would be required, you know, all of that. So I think as we're moving ahead, that's one of the things that you will be seeing more of. And if there are deputy regional directors want to comment on audits, audit inspections particularly. Gerard just raises his eyebrows. Steve,
I actually did an inspection yesterday. So we've begun.
Boom. And how are the desk audits going? As long as you're unmuted.
Actually, fairly well. We're doing quite a bit of those. Where we haven't been able to do the inspections, we really beefed up level ones and branched into level 3 audits from the desk. I think that in the Southeast region, the number of level 1 audits we did during these 3 months or so was equal to what we normally do in half a year. So we doubled our output on the level 1 audits during this.
So do you expect any of those will then, I mean, some of them are going into the level 3 audits, which would also include an inspection. So
yes,
do
so
you see a backlog of inspections that we'd be working through?
Yeah, I mean, not only backlog of inspections for audits, but we typically do an inspection when we're doing enforcement. So once we loosen up our enforcement approach, we'll start resuming that as well.
Okay. So any other questions, issues, observations?
I'll just make, I know you're soliciting comment from everybody, but I'll pipe in again, if you don't mind, Paul. One thing I just sort of highlight for everybody is that the shifting deadlines that we're all trying to work through in these executive orders, these COVID executive orders, are very tricky. And if you have a situation where it matters, you should definitely seek your own legal advice. It does require some careful thought, and we're trying to sort of highlight these orders and make sure you're aware of them. But again, we can't put ourselves in the position of giving you legal advice in any of your particular situations.
But also, I would kind of not only, seek your own legal advice, but where you have unique circumstances or questions about the deadlines, you should feel comfortable, contacting us to ask us as well. Not that we would give you legal advice on those, but from a programmatic point of view, if there's, the landscape is always changing. Some of these documents, as we've just talked about, might be hard to find on the web. So if you feel, or your client feels, that there's ambiguity about what the expectations are, really feel free to contact one of the DRD for the region the site is in, or Liz or me, particularly through BWSC.information or BWSC.regulations, and ask, because we're not trying to set up a situation where we're trying to get you for missing a deadline in this. We want to make sure work with you to bring the program back up to speed to where it should be. But given that we are going to be working under restrictions, for some time into the future, we're all going to have some level of flexibility and understanding. And I think I am very happy that we're working in the Wayside Cleanup Program, where we do have the ability to exercise flexibility. And I think the program, as it's written, really works well for us in these challenging times, and I want to make sure that it continues to work well for all of us.
Right. No, absolutely, Paul. I mean, that I didn't mean to take away from that at all. I mean, if you guys have issues at sites, you should always feel free to contact the department to talk it through and talk it through early.
Okay. With that, we are very low energy this morning.
We really are. Yeah.
So I don't want to push it too far. And so it's warm and humid out there. So I hope you're like I am, in a nice air-conditioned space. Well, Greg McGregor was out on his back deck. But have a good day. We'll be back next week at 9 o'clock. But feel free to send us any questions or comments or suggestions for language or thoughts about how we should be doing this kind of returning to closer to normal. And we'll talk to you next week.
That was a good,
Paul.
it was a good meeting.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Paul.
Bye-bye.